All right, awesome. We are live. Let me make sure we're going on all the platforms here. We're
Okay.
so excited to be tuning in this Monday. So happy Monday, happy start of the week to everyone. Um, this is Purse Strings. We are here every week to bring financial tips, tricks, pieces of advice to help women become what we like to say is financially fearless. And then when you're ready to go start investing, you need to get a will or a trust, you're ready to dive into that debt, or just know, that you're financially fearless. We have top tier financial professionals willing, ready, and able to help you. Those could be attorneys, realtors, FAs, CPAs, all those people. And we call them our purse strings approved professionals. Diane Robinson is one of them. So we're so excited to have her on today to talk about this year, I'm going to take charge of my financial freedom. But before we dive into all of that, Diane, could you give us a little intro of who you are and what you do?
Well, my name is Diane Robinson. I am a registered representative with Innovation Partners LLC and an investment advisor with IP Financial Advisory Services. And I've been in the business for quite a long time, and I work with individuals and businesses that just don't know where to get started, and they just need some advice, and they want to be treated like a person instead of a number.
I love that. We all want to be treated as people and we all have these unique situations. So we have to be.
Yes.
Um, but we're excited to have you on today. And if anyone's watching and has any questions along the way, throw them in the chat. We're happy to answer them. If you're watching the replay, you can still throw them in the comments, and we're happy to come back to those and get to them later. So let's dive in. Our topic today is, this year I'm going to take charge of my financial future. So, what is like the first step everyone should take, no matter who you are?
Well, you need to know your numbers. I mean, if you don't know how much money you have in checking, savings, or investments, then you don't have the basis to start moving up. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you know. I always check daily on mine so I know how much is in my checking account and savings account. Um, and if you're the type of person who only checks, when the statement comes, you might be in trouble because then, right now, hacking is a big thing. So someone could wipe out your checking account or savings account, and you would have to work a little bit harder to get that money back. But the other reason is because you really do need to know how much money you have in your checking savings account for paying the bills and knowing, if there's emergency, what needs, if do you have the money to pay for the emergency, and if you don't, then you're going to have to make some other choices. You also need to know if you have if you don't have a savings account, I recommend that you start one. You don't have to put a large amount into it. Maybe you just put $5 or $10 each month, but you do it on a consistent basis. So that way you start building your savings account. And if you're working and your employer offers a 401k or some type of other retirement plan, you know, make sure that you get involved in that and you contribute to that as well.
So,
And
go ahead.
And I was going to say also, once you have these accounts created, once you have the checking, savings, and the retirement, go online and create accounts for them because that's one way you can monitor them on a daily basis, an hourly basis, and you can also set up alerts so that if someone um, takes money out of yours, let's say your checking account that wasn't approved and it wasn't you get notified right away so that you can notify the bank that something's wrong.
Awesome. So, those like three main accounts you kind of want to know is your checking, your savings, and your retirement.
Right.
And I love that idea of those notifications. I know sometimes, like with my bank, you can turn on notifications if it's over $125 or something like that, just
Yeah.
so I know,
Make it as low
you
as
know,
possible.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So once you know your numbers, what should you do with that information?
Well, you need to take an inventory. So you need to know, you need to create a budget, and you also need to take inventory of what you do have. So you have expenditures going out every month. So there's utilities, maybe there's a car payment, a mortgage. You need to put those into perspective. You need to know how much income you have coming in and how many and what the amount of your expenditures are. Because if you have more expenditures than you do money, then it's going to be difficult for you to get to your financial freedom. So you want to do a budget and try to stick to that budget as much as possible. And then you also want to create some type of emergency funds. So if you have $10 or $15 left over at the end of the month, put it into an emergency fund. So eventually it'll grow enough that, God forbid, you do have an emergency, you do have some funds to help with that. So you need also to determine your spending habits. Is there something that you can do without? Instead of going to, let's say, going out to eat once a week, could you make it once every 2 weeks or once a month and take that extra money and put it away in your savings or in your checking account? You need to, know which expenditures are mandatory, like your mortgage, and which ones are not, like going out to eat.
Definitely. Knowing where your money is going is essential, especially to know how to move forward. Um, and so when building this emergency fund, how much money do you recommend should be in there?
Well, I always recommend that at least 6 months of wages.
Okay.
But you know what? You can have it more than that. I've seen some people that say 3 months, but I've found that it's probably better to be at least 6 months of expenditures and wages that you need to replenish, because if you lose your job, and of course you can go on unemployment
Right.
unless you're self-employed. But if you go on unemployment, you don't get that money right away. At least not in our state. You might have a lag of 1 or 2, 3, 4 weeks before you get it. So you want to make sure that you have enough money to cover at least 6 months of expenditures, and that way, if you don't need it, that's great. At least you have a cushion, just in case you do.
Definitely, definitely. And these emergency funds are great. I mean, if you lose your job, if I know somebody like who I was talking to was trying to leave an abusive relationship, so they were just
Hmm.
able to use their emergency fund. You might have some random occurrence, some random dog surgery, those different things that come up in life that are unplanned for, but this way you won't be, knocked back on your feet.
Right. And that's an excellent reason why you should know how much is in your checking account, savings account, and everything else. Because if something like that happens, you don't want to be trying to find out after the spouse or the partner has moved all that money and you don't know where it is.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. Um, so as we know, no one's perfect, no budget is perfect. So how should our viewers plan for the unexpected?
Well, as we all know, the unexpected always happens, so we can expect it. Well, so the first is if it's a loss of your job. A lot of times there are signals that something's wrong, and so you may want to start planning, looking for another job just in case. You want to make sure that if you think that you're going to be losing your job or there's a possibility, that you maybe put some extra money back so that you do have some cushion if that should happen. Now, if it's some other thing, let's say a death in the family, you want some type of life insurance,
Yeah.
because that's the best way to replenish funds for someone for your family, because you don't want your death to affect them any more than you don't want it to affect them financially. Emotionally, they're already going to be they're torn up over
Distraught.
your death, right? It's just awful. And on top of that, you don't want them to worry about the finances. You want them to be able to stay in your home, especially if you have children. You want to make sure they have a home to stay in, and you don't have to worry about moving and doing other things that you already have enough to deal with. And
Right.
you don't want your children to have to deal with that, um, if you have children. So that's something you need to look at. The other is maybe you have a job and something happens and now you're disabled. Maybe it's just a
Mm.
temporary one, so you want some type of disability insurance for that. Sometimes the companies offer it, and sometimes they don't. So if they don't, you want to get your own, and you want to make
Mhm.
sure that you have enough to replace your income for whatever period. Sometimes you can get it for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It just depends on what the company offers, but you want to take advantage of those types of things. Also, if you're older, you want to make sure that you've planned for what happens if you become frail, or your spouse gets dementia. There's all sorts of things you have to plan for. That one to me is the most difficult to plan for, and the one that no one wants to plan for, because who wants to admit they're getting old and they need someone to take care of them? And who wants to make their children their caretakers when they were used to being the children's caretakers? So those are some of the types of insurances that you need to look at.
That long-term care, that aging one is essential, especially just to have those conversations and to let your kid know that they should be prepared for this, or this is kind of what your plan is in place, because they are part of that process.
Right. And often the children don't want to admit that their parents are going to be getting old.
Right.
And the parents don't want to admit it, but it happens. So my motto is you prepare and hope for the best so that you don't need to worry if something does happen.
Right, right. This is all great tips of advice. And so anyone tuning in, we are talking about how we're going to, gain financial freedom this year. So if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. But my next kind of question for you is, should part of, our whole process include planning for the future? I know you did just mention some stuff about, long-term care and things like that, but how does this all play together?
Well, that's absolutely. You should plan for the future, unless you know that you're going to die on XYZ day. And I don't think there's any of us that really know that. So you have to plan for the future.
Hmm.
And by not planning, you don't have a future. You have a past that you're living with.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you do plan for the future. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do to plan for the future. Like I said, for instance, let's say you have a mortgage. You want to make sure that if something happens to you, that mortgage is paid off. So again, that's life insurance usually is the best way to do that. Um, you also want to make sure that if you don't have a retirement plan, that you try to put some money away either in an IRA or Roth IRA or some other type of retirement plan so that you do have some money when you retire.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I think statistically it's like 56 or 60 some percent of Americans that are on Social Security. Social Security is their only form of retirement income.
Wow.
And if you know anyone who's living on Social Security alone, talk to them. That ought to scare you because they don't get enough on Social Security alone to get them through retirement. You also want to make sure that if your children want to go to college, that you do some type of college funding planning.
Hmm.
That may be, looking for scholarships. It may be that your child may want to go to Yale, but you can't afford it, and so he or she may have to go to one of the smaller schools.
Right.
There's a lot of things you can do to be prepared for the future. And if you have a 401k or some type of other retirement plan that's sponsored by your employer, you want to make sure you're taking full advantage of that, especially if the employer is doing a match. So let's say they do a 4% match. That means for every 4% of your income that you put into the 401k or the retirement plan, they will match that 4%. That's basically free money to you.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that any way that you can get extra money without having to work for it or to do other things for it, that you take advantage of it.
Those are all great tips. And something we always like to comment in there is, so many people love to help pay for their kids' colleges, but like you
Mhm.
said, so many people are not even prepared for retirement. So make sure that
Right.
you're putting your retirement first before your kids' college education, because that money doesn't mean, they'll get a high paying job and then pay for your retirement. Um,
Yeah, it doesn't usually work out that well.
No, but we see a
Because
lot of people put all their
Mhm.
eggs in kind of in their child and not take care of their own retirement. Um, and for
I mean,
women, we need to start putting ourselves first.
absolutely, but I think that applies to everybody. I mean, you want
Right,
to take care of your children. You don't want them to, graduate with a lot of debt. Nobody does. But that means they may have to make some decisions.
right,
And once they realize that they're going to be paying most of it back, that may influence where they're going.
right.
And
Exactly.
fortunately, college education, um, while it's still a high priority for a lot of people, right now, I think, especially in our area, trades are where the
Hmm.
demand is. And so you can go to a trade school and not, spend as much to get that experience in education that you would at a college.
Yeah, I had a roommate who went to trade school and he got it all paid for, and then came
Hmm.
out making very good hourly wage. It was impressive, to have all that taken care of.
Yeah, and the other thing is I think a lot of parents and children don't know where to look for funds.
Right.
I know in our county, they did a study 10 years ago or 15 years ago, whatever it is now, and they realized that we were going to, in 10 years or so, not have enough tradespeople in our county to meet the demand. So
Yeah.
they put a plan in place to try to stem that tide. And so there's money there. You
Oh,
just have to
smart.
know where to find it, and you have to be willing to do it. And so sometimes the parents have to do that, and other times it should be a joint effort by the parents and the child. I always believe if the child has a hand in it and they know how hard it is to get the money, they may be more appreciative.
Definitely, definitely. And I love how the community kind of saw that impact coming
Mhm.
and so figured that out, down in advance. So what is the final step that you recommend in this, taking charge of your financial freedom?
Rinse and repeat. So you want to start back at number one. You want to make sure that you know your numbers again. You want to take an inventory. You may have to update your budget. Maybe you got a raise. So you want to redo that budget and put that raise in there. Or maybe, your hours got cut and you need to adjust your budget and your spending to make up for that loss of income. You also want to make sure that you have the insurances or whatever you need to put in place if there's something that happens unusual, so that your family, or you, if you don't have a family, so that you can be prepared to at least have a foot holding into solving that problem. And
Definitely.
then again, you also want to make sure that you've invested in your retirement and your children's education and just life. I
Hmm.
mean, you work hard all your life. You want to retire. Maybe you don't want to, sail around the world, but you also want to enjoy your retirement. And I think everyone
Right.
deserves to do that. They deserve to have the retirement that they want. So the question is, did you start early enough to reach that? If you haven't, can you do it now and save as much money or invest as much money to earn what you need to have the lifestyle that you want when you retire?
Love it. Yeah. It's that rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And so if someone was, interested in continuing this conversation and working with you, what kind of services can you provide and what does that, beginning of that relationship kind of look like?
Well, I sit down with the clients and I ask what their bucket list is. What's your bucket list? What do you want to do? For instance, I want to learn how to fly.
I was going
That's
to
the
ask what's
bottom
on your
line. I
bucket
want to learn how to
list.
fly. It doesn't mean I'm going anywhere. I just want to learn how to fly. So that's on my bucket list. So how am I going to manage that? So I ask what's on their bucket list. So I need to know what they want to achieve. If you don't know what you want to achieve, then it's my job to help you try to define it. Maybe
Hmm.
you just really want to go golfing all day, so you need to know what's in your bucket list. So maybe your bucket list also includes, having your child go to college and not have to get a loan.
Hmm.
They'll love you for it, but the thing is you have to plan for those things. So then I try to get an idea of what they want, because it's not the same for everybody. Some people just want to retire and sit around and visit their grandchildren and do things like that. Others want to travel. Maybe they want to be involved in some type of organization so that they have something to do.
Hmm.
So I think it starts with the budget, the bucket plan. What do you want to do? And then from there, we go into, okay, so what are the resources that you have?
Right.
Where are you deficient so that we can try to get you to where you want to be? And so it's a process. So it starts, slowly, because I have to get to know my clients. If I don't know them, then how do I know, really what they want and what they are willing to do?
Right. I love that. And I love that you want to learn how to fly. It's amazing to kind of start with a goal in mind and kind of work backwards and try to make that come true versus
Right.
just
Hmm.
shooting in the dark and hoping that you're going to get there, which is really why a professional could come in handy for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a ton of great information about how to kind of start your year and get financially free. It's really, like you said, knowing your numbers and, going through all these steps. And it's just kind of that same cycle. It might seem almost basic sometimes, like people have done their budget once, but like you said, it's not just a one and done kind of thing.
Right.
Um,
And the other thing is don't get overwhelmed.
yeah.
If you have, let's say you want to send your children to college, start small and build on it. Just don't get overwhelmed, because once you get overwhelmed, you give up. You
Yeah.
just, that just what happens. You get overwhelmed. You don't know how to move forward. And so things stop. So that's the
Hmm.
worst thing you can do, is just let it overwhelm you. If you don't want to go see a professional, talk to your friends and your family. Maybe they have suggestions for you that can help you move forward. There's no shame in asking someone for help. Matter of fact, that's a smart thing to do, because if someone already has the experience, why should you have to, have the downfalls that they've had, or the setbacks that they've had, if they can help you navigate through that and avoid it?
Definitely. There's no point in reinventing the wheel if somebody already knows how it works.
Right.
It can help you just getting on a smooth path. So, well, thank you again for coming on today. Are there any other last parting tips, tricks, pieces of advice you wanted to share that we didn't touch on?
Well, I think if you're doing your budget, you might want to have some type of software to help you do it. Um,
Yeah.
there are some simple ones. The one that I use for my personal accounts, because it's easy for my husband to use, because he's not computer literate and he doesn't want to be. But Microsoft has a program. It's called Microsoft Money Plus Sunset Deluxe. It's free, but it's an old software for accounting, and it's set up like a checkbook, so it's easy to learn. Just don't connect it to your banking account, because it's an old version and Microsoft is not supporting it. But if you're
Mhm.
looking for something, that you don't have to pay to use, that's one way to look. Look for other types of software that can help you do the things that you want to do.
Yeah. I use the app Copilot and I really like it.
Hmm.
But I know, yeah, everyone has their own way, is whatever works for you. Just you got to keep it up.
Right. And even if it's pencil and paper, and you just have, a sheet that says, okay, here's my expenses, here's my inflows, and then, it doesn't matter. Just do something to get started. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to start slowly, if that's what you want to do or need to do, and then build on your success as you go. And as you keep building on your success, it's going to get easier and easier to do.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on here and sharing your expertise. If anyone has any questions, they can always reach out to Diane. She's also one of our Purse Strings approved professionals, so you can look her up on our site, pursestrings.co. And we will be back here again next week with another Money Monday. But until then, let's make sure if you watch this, put something into action. Don't just watch it, but take some action on it as well. Um, if you have questions, just reach out. We're happy to help. And let's make this year financially fearless. So thank you again, Diane, and we'll talk to
Thank
everyone
you for
soon.
having me.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.